Hi everyone and welcome to Falcon's Fun. I'm Falcon and today we're going to be having fun with the Haslab Transformers Legacy Omega Prime, or at least we're going to try to, because if you're watching this video you're at least vaguely aware that there are problems with this set out of the box. And I must emphasize that out of the box. I want to make it very clear up front before we talk about anything else that these fixes need to be done out of the box. Don't try to transform it, don't try to play with it to see if the tolerances are within an acceptable range for you. No, there are fatal flaws with this set that moving the parts can cause irreparable damage. So I cannot stress it enough. Do not play with your toy, fix it first, and then enjoy it. That's what I've done. I've took it out of the box, I disassembled what I needed to fix it, put it back together, and now I love it. And so, again, I cannot stress that enough. Please, 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 fix this out of the box and then enjoy it. I cannot recommend it enough because you're just gonna absolutely hate living with knowing that part of your expensive made-to-order limited edition item is broken in some way. Should we have to be dealing with this? No, and I'm not really here to litigate that in this video. I'm just here to tell you what the problems are and how best to fix them. And I will emphasize that I am, of course, not an expert. That being said, I do feel like I am a bit of a perfectionist. I probably put some sort of clickbaity title on this video. So if I'm gonna fix something, especially something as expensive and limited as this, I'm gonna try to do it the right way the first time. And so these are the methods that I've best found to do these fixes. If you have any sort of even better ways to do this, feel free to post those in the comments below. And I'll be sure to highlight that. But yeah, we're gonna go through all the segments of the video here and the steps, but those are just a few things I wanted to get out of the way and emphasize up front in this video. I'm also want to mention that I'm recording this the last week of May 2025. So while not all of the units have been shipped to people that have ordered this, a good number have. And at this point, I feel pretty confident that all of the major issues have been found. Anything that's discovered beyond this point is probably a minor thing, or is a QC problem specific to someone else's copy. What we're going to be talking about in the issues in this video are issues that affect all copies from what I've seen. I've been pretty active on the TFW forum thread about this set and the issues for it, and I've been helping contribute to the recommended solutions and fixes for this guy as well. So again, I'm not an expert, but I have been spending quite a bit of time and energy and thought into how to fix these guys and the best way to do them. So that's what we're going to be talking about in this video here today. Okay, so these segments in the video here, again, we'll put chapter markers below, but we're going to talk about the problems, just a brief overview of the problems. We're going to talk about the tools that you need to do these fixes, and then I'll do how-to step-by-step for each of the fixes and show you what needs to be done. Now, before we get into all that, though, I would like to say if at any point during this video you find something helpful, I would greatly appreciate it if you let me know by giving this video a thumbs up. Alright, so a brief overview of the problems with this set. Of course, the one you're primarily here for likely is Optimus Prime. The fact that the lower torso, the abdomen region here can crack. For some people, this is cracked out of the box. Once we get into the specific Optimus Prime segment, we'll go over how and why that happens and what you need to do to avoid it. But again, this is a fatal flaw that needs to be dealt with out of the box before you even move this figure, because if that's a structural problem, if the crack is bad enough and there's really no way of fixing it, you can mend it with glue, but there's no way to really fix that problem without completely replacing the torso. Now, you may not be aware, but there are also problems with Ultra Magnus that need to be dealt with out of the box. Some of which you can deal with, others you cannot. So the main issue with Ultra Magnus is with the backpack here and the wings. Now, a lot of people experience a problem where the tolerances on these wings, when you push them in and out for transformation and alt mode, it takes an extreme amount of force in order to move these on the posts that they're on and how they notch into the backpack. And I have seen it where someone has, when they were trying to pull the wings back out to go into alt mode, that they actually pulled the wing straight off of the post and the pin that it's on and completely sheared the plastic. And so that is, of course, another fatal flaw, and that needs to be addressed with this set out of the box before you do much playing with it. There's also an issue in the back of the legs here, where I don't think that this is a major joint that is really necessary. I think it's mostly there just for it to feel good when transforming, but there's an issue here that can create stress marks underneath this panel here, and I've seen it where it's bad enough where it looks like if it were to continue, it would create potentially a hole over time with how much it's pushing into the plastic on the other side. Again, we'll go into more detail later, but that's another issue that needs to be addressed out of the box. And we'll talk about it later, and you may not be able to see it on camera. We'll talk about how you can see it and why it's a problem. But there's also a yellowing or a discoloration issue on the white plastic on Omega Prime. It's both on the hands and can be seen on the hood as well. Again, it's probably not coming across on camera, but we'll talk about why that is so and how you can check yours later on in the Ultra Magnus segment. All right, so let's get into the tools that we'll be needing to perform these fixes. Of course, primarily we're going to be needing a screwdriver in order to take some panels apart and some pieces apart, and then we're going to need some sandpaper. A lot of parts need to be sanded down and material removed. But there's a very specific screwdriver bit size that you need for these transformers. I myself am using an iFixit set here. I believe this is the Manta driver kit is what they call it. This is, of course, iFixit is known for their tools and supplies for fixing electronics. So that's what I had this for already. It just happened to have a correct bit size in here for transformers. But in essence, what you're going to need is a JIS J1 bit. JIS stands for Japanese Industrial Standard. Now, at first glance, this is just a normal cross pattern screw head, and it looks very similar to a Phillips head. However, it is shaped ever so slightly differently, such that if you try to use a Phillips head screwdriver on your transformers, you will strip the screw head over time. So you need to be using a JIS bit for your transformers, and specifically I found that a J1 size JIS bit works with this set very well. I will say that if you are buying a screwdriver specifically for this set and you don't already have one, I recommend getting one with a bit of a longer neck. We'll get into that later and what I had to do in order to kind of cheat what I'm working with here, but some of the wells that the screws are in are pretty deep, and I found that this bit just wasn't quite long enough to really get into where I needed it to. So if you're buying a specific J1 screwdriver, not just a bit, make sure you're getting a long one. If you're buying a set of bits, make sure try to see if you can get one with longer necks. And of course, the diameter is important as well. I believe the iFixit screwdriver sets are 4mm. So I found that the diameter of these was fine to get in there. But if you have a screwdriver bit set where the necks are of a bigger diameter, they may not fit into these wells, these deep wells that these screws are in. So that's something to keep in mind. You'll be needing some sandpaper as well for these guys to remove material. And please do not just throw some low grit sandpaper at these and call it a day. I've seen too many people recommending that and doing that online, and it looks absolutely terrible. Again, I'm not an expert, but I definitely want my things to look nice and function well. And the entire point of what we're trying to do in these fixes here is to make sure these joints move smoother. And so we want to leave them in a smooth, frictionless state so that they function well. So we don't want to just throw 200 or 300 grit sandpaper at it and call it a day. And you have to also keep in mind that this is plastic, not wood, so the appropriate grit sandpaper is going to be different. So what I did is I got a variety pack of sandpapers of different grits. And of course, you don't need to buy any fancy sandpaper. You don't need to get, model making paper sticks. You don't need to get sandpaper blocks or anything. You can just take a simple, cheap DIY approach. And get a variety of your just standard wet dry sandpaper from the hardware store. I just bought a bunch of sandpaper from the brand 3M because they're a reputable brand and it's fairly easy to come by and get these sandpapers. So what I did is for your quote-unquote rough sandpaper grits, I got a variety pack that had 220, 320, and 400 in there. And so those are the primary sandpaper grits you're going to be using when removing material and doing some rough fits to check your tolerances and make sure the piece is where you want it to be. Beyond that, we're going to want to polish the plastic once we're done. And so in order to do that, I got polishing sandpaper grits. And so for those, I used 800, 1000, 1500, and 2000. And so of course I'm sure you've already noticed that these are all on popsicle sticks. And so what I found to better handle the sandpaper and get it to do the job I need it to, and to get into tighter spaces that we're going to be dealing with, was to make my own sandpaper sticks instead of trying to source all these grits in already made sandpaper sticks, which you can find. But I felt it was much more economical and easy to just make my own. And it's pretty simple. You just get a bag of your regular standard wooden popsicle sticks. You get some double-sided tape. Really anything will do for this application. You don't need anything fancy. And then of course your sandpaper, you just do a rough cut, stick it on there, and then trim off the excess. And then you have a bunch of sandpaper sticks that you can now use for this and for anything in the future. I will say though, if I were to do this again, when I eventually do have to make new sandpaper sticks to replace these ones that get used up, I'll probably want to try to break the popsicle stick in half and then do the same grit on both of those halves so that I have an additional 2 edges to use for that grit of sandpaper. Let me find one that's on, but definitely on these higher grit sandpapers, you can see where I was very much using the edges of my sandpaper stick more than anything else. And so once those edges gets used, this guy is pretty much useless other than in the middle. But if I'm primarily using it for the edges of the sandpaper, well, then, I need to make a new one now. So I would definitely consider breaking your popsicle sticks in half. And then putting the same grit on both halves, so that way you have an additional 2 edges to utilize. I also found that for some applications and areas that we need to get into on this set, it was actually quite beneficial to take a popsicle stick and do a double-sided on the sandpaper for it. So you put your double-sided tape on both sides of the popsicle stick and then wrap around your sandpaper. Again, I found that using this leading edge here was really helpful on some areas. So yeah, would definitely recommend doing that as well. And so I did this. I also did the double-sided for a variety of sandpaper grits as well. You're also going to need an X-Acto knife to get some material off. It's much easier to use an X-Acto knife in some areas on this set versus using just sandpaper. Of course, this camera does not want to focus on my X-Acto knife right now. There you go. But you know what an X-Acto knife is. So yeah, you're going to want an X-Acto knife to carve away some of the plastic here that we're going to be dealing with. And specifically, I found that the number 17 chisel blade, I believe this is the narrowest width chisel blade that is made for X-Acto knives, a number 17. If you don't already have an X-Acto blade somehow, I recommend that you get some sort of set with a handle and a variety of blades. Many years ago, I went real fancy and I got this box set that come with different handles and a bunch of blades. But yeah, if you already have an X-Acto knife with a regular blade, you can try to make that work. But again, I found it's best to use the chisel blade. It works really nice, and this is now my favorite X-Acto blade size. This next one is not required, but I do highly recommend it, and that is some silicone-based lubricants. This is from the brand Super Lube. I think this was recommended in a video by MGO for the tidal wave. That's how I happened upon this brand, and that's what I ended up getting. Really, any silicone-based lubricant should work. You primarily want to watch out, make sure it is silicone-based. That typically means it's safe to use with plastics, but be sure to double-check the product page. Be sure to double-check the manufacturing information. Be sure to double-check the bottle somewhere to make sure that it is safe to use with plastic. Again, this isn't required, but I do recommend still using some sort of lubricant on these guys, just because what we're trying to do is to make some parts move more smoothly. So this can only help, it can't hurt, and if you somehow end up putting too much on, you can easily wipe it off, you can wash it off, so it's not a big deal if you get too much or you just don't like how loose something ends up being when you put this on. It might be a pain in the ass to get rid of it, but again, like I said, it can only help, it can't really hurt. And if you do end up going that route with wanting to put a lubricant on there, I also recommend that you get some sort of pallet, some sort of cup to put the lubricant into initially, and then a small paintbrush. Some of the places that we're going to want to apply it to are pretty small, and you don't want to be dumping a whole bunch of lube where it doesn't need to be. So it's somewhere to put a few drops, and then get a little paintbrush so you can wick it up and then apply it directly to where we need it to go is something I recommend. All right, so first up we have here, of course, is Optimus Prime. It's probably the primary reason you're here. And so out of the box, Optimus Prime comes packaged in alt mode, as does Ultra Magnus. And so we want to keep that as much in shape as we can, because we want to move the torso as little as possible before we can get into it. So you're going to want to partially disassemble it, remove the rear portion of the fire truck so that you have just the cab here. And so what you're going to want to do is fold out this side panel, and that will immediately get you access to these two screws. And these screws, as you can see, are keeping together what is essentially the spine of the core mode of Optimus Prime here. So yeah, first up, we're going to be removing these two screws, and then of course make sure while you're doing this, while you're disassembling, you have somewhere to put your screws. This is the top tray of my iFixit box here. It has all these segments that you can put your screws into. Especially on Optimus Prime here, where all the screws that we're going to be removing, they're all slightly different, and so you want to make sure you're putting the same screws back where they belong, of course. I even go as far as knowing which screw of the same type goes in which position. And so having some sort of segmented tray or some sort of magnet board or magnet tray is going to help greatly in this project. Because we're going to be removing, especially on Optimus Prime here, different screws of different types of, well, you know, you're still using the same bit for all the same screws. but they're of varying lengths and slightly different widths. So you're going to want to make sure you're putting the same screws back. So yeah, so first we're going to take out these 2 screws on the spine. All right, now that you have those screws out, the spine is going to want to come apart. So this piece will come off right here. And now normally there is a small little plastic piece that goes in here and it just slots right in there. And it really doesn't serve much of a major purpose. You can see here that there's really only 2 notches here on this piece that connects to the spine that we're going to talk about later. But there's really only 2 notches here, and it's effectively this plastic piece that goes in here is a ratchet, but it's really a fake ratchet. It has some extra stability, but really I think it's just there so that transformation feels good, quote unquote, you know. So in order to put less pressure on the torso, I want as little pressure on the torso as possible. So I just took out that piece so that this joint was just a little bit more loose. You'll see later why it's totally fine to remove that. And so for peace of mind, I took mine out. Alternatively, you could take that piece and sand it down a little bit so the notch doesn't have as much of a bite to it. So that's something you can do alternatively. But for me, I just completely removed it because I just, again, want the peace of mind that there's as little force, as little pressure happening for the torso as possible. So I went and took that out. But anyway, so now that that is removed, we can move back to the front of the cab here, and you can very gently, you're going to want to, as much as you can, pull this off of the tabs. And now we go back down here, and this is pretty loose, so we can turn this down. I want to turn it down at the legs. And so you will slide the legs off now. Mine's a little loose doing this because I've of course already done the fix. So mine is moving pretty freely here. But yours out of the box won't be like this. So this will actually be a little bit easier than how I'm fiddling with it now. But yeah, so if we just move this back and forth, the legs will eventually come off for us. There we go. So then we can put those off to the side. We don't need to worry about that anymore. Okay. And so now you've got just the torso here. And I recommend actually leaving this piece. This is the part of concern that we're going to get to here. I recommend leaving this half of the spine attached. It'll make handling this piece easier once we get it fully disassembled. And it'll also help you remember how things are oriented and how this piece needs to be when you put it all back together. All right, so next, actually these light bars, it's up to you. These light bars are kind of loose on most people's copies. You can take those off if you want. They're just on little 5mm posts. So you just, if you want to, you can take those off, put them off to the side so you don't lose track of them. Okay, so here, you want to lift that up a little bit, and then that will allow us to move these arms off to the side. Okay, just trying to remember how this goes myself. This is a bit tricky here in all the steps. I believe we want to bring the arms forward a little bit. Yes, we want to bring the arms forward because we want to take apart the backpack that houses the head. And so we've got 3 screws here for the backpack that we're going to take off. Trying to get this arm out of the way as much as possible. All right. Okay. Now this guy is held together pretty well. So you just want to gently pull it apart. This right side comes off pretty easily. But the others, and you could probably, let's see here. You can oh no, this, we need to slide off this other side of it now, which is in there pretty good, mostly at the top here. And once you get it going towards the edge, you can take it out pretty easily, and then the head is just slotted on there like that. Okay, so that is the backpack. And then next, we're going to want to remove these two screws here, which the arms are attached to. All right, so this part can be a little tricky, getting the arms lifted out of there of the torso, because you have to now bend them back because of how they slot into the torso here. So you have to then bend the arms back so that you can pull this whole thing out. So you can see how that slots into there. You can set the arms off to the side. We don't need that anymore. Okay, and so now we're left with the problem child here, the torso. Okay, and so now we've got these 4 screws now left, and see how it's even worse on Ultra Magnus, but see how these wells can be a little deep here. And it's basically not much more than the diameter of the screw head itself, so that's why you need a narrow neck on your screwdriver bit in order to get in there. All right, and so here we are with all of our torso pieces. We've got our back, we've got our front, and then of course we have the infamous gray T-piece, or T-bar, vaguely T-shaped piece here. And so this is the primary problem child of what's going on in this set. And so the way this functions, you have these fins for some reason running up and down the lower portion of the torso, and then up top it's just you know, solid more or less material, and then this piece sits in here in between the two halves and slides up and down the torso in between different modes when you're transforming Optimus. And so the problem is that this piece here is wider than the gap between where it sits. And so when I initially took this part out of my front torso, because it was wedged in there pretty good, I could feel the torso like relax. Like I could feel it move back closer together in a more neutral position when I did that. So this is definitely the problem here. And so what most people recommend is that you just sand down the sides of this T-piece and you're good to go. But that's not the whole story. You see, it also has, I'll throw up a picture so you can see the original state of it. But where that little rectangle is, there used to be like a little, what I call a nub. And I was actually the first person to post about this on TFW. And this nub, for whatever reason, sits on this track here as a part of the rear of the torso, and you see that there are three little notches there. And again, I'll throw up some pictures to better illustrate this. I took pictures before I removed that nub, but what was happening was that little nub would sit into these cutouts so that the torso would, slot into position effectively. But the problem was when this T-piece was sliding up and down on this center track, well, when the nub isn't in the notch, it's on the track. So that means when it's on the track, it's effectively bigger front to back. And so it was putting pressure on the torso front to back when you were sliding it up and down. Honestly, that could be as equal, if not just a worse problem than the width being out of spec, because pushing the torso apart is not a nothing amount of force. I'll post the pictures that I took earlier, and it was pushing the lower. Once you get up here, it's pushing the lower torso apart quite a bit. And so if the screws are tight enough, that force needs to go somewhere, and it's trying to push the torso apart. So I can very easily see that the nub on this T-piece also being a significant issue and applying forces to where it shouldn't be going on this torso. And you'll also notice, my other screw just came out finally. Make sure I keep track of that. You'll also notice how I'm trying to be careful here because I actually put some lubricant in here, so I don't want to make a mess. On the rear torso here, yes, these tracks are partially here for this T-piece to rest on, but this is also a structural element, and these extra bars go all the way up and down the entire rear of the torso. So that will, even though the plastic down here is thinner than compared to up here, these elements are going to provide extra structure for the back of the torso. You don't have that same thing on this front piece here. You do have some tracks up here, but those don't extend all the way down. So you just have this thinner, I mean, it's not the thinnest plastic, but it's definitely thinner plastic than the rest of some parts of the torso, and there's no reinforcement of this portion here. And so this is primarily where you see it cracking for most people. I thankfully did not have any out of the box. I believe this crack that we're seeing right here is just part of the mold process. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. Everyone has that. So that's nothing to worry about in my opinion. But yeah, so your primary thing is here, you want to take this T-piece, you want to take your sandpaper and just sand down the sides and test fit it as you go. This bigger, taller side goes in the front, and then the side with the nub goes in the rear. So just keep sanding it with your lower grit sandpapers and test fit as you go. Making sure you get you don't want a loose slide, but you don't want it to be getting too snug when you're going up and down. So that's what you're looking for. I will say that so I did take out some digital calipers, and I did notice that the second and third fins, so like where the community refers to these plastic pieces here, these lower plastic pieces as fins, the second and third one from the top seem to be the narrowest. So if you want to get real fancy, you could attempt to sand down those as well before you go too far with this. It doesn't need to be a lot. It's just a few tenths of a millimeter that this thing is out of spec by and causing a problem. So you don't want to go too crazy. That's why you want to test fit as you go. But yeah, if you want to get real nuts, you can try sanding those two on either side down a little bit to help you. It wasn't as big of a problem on the rear, I found. So I would just make sure you're sanding so it's in it fits and slides well in the back. But yeah, so what happens is that so one and or two things can happen with this torso, is that because this is too wide, both laterally and front to back, what happens is that this is too tight, and it's assembled in robot mode and it's shipped in alt mode. So what happens is this is sitting up here, and then the assemblers is going to pull the torso up. And so what happens is when people open this up, even if they don't see cracks on the torso, like a lot of these fins will be broken in a downwards motion. So clearly it was the torso was pulled up, and which caused these fins to break. And honestly, if the fins break, then that's actually a better thing than the alternative, because that means that those parts gave before the actual torso, the abdomen area. So if, hopefully that doesn't crack on you, because that would be obviously worst case scenario. But yeah, that's why you want to open this out of the box and do this immediately, so that you don't run the risk of it breaking, because torso on all of these is tight. And this problem is due to, literal tenths of a millimeter, not even a full millimeter. And so the variance in production can lead to some copies being a little bit better than others, but like it's still a problem. This is still a design flaw. These fins, I don't know why, like that should just be solid plastic. So it's a solid plastic rail going all the way up and down. I can't imagine why it was designed like this. I'm an engineer, but I'm not a mechanical engineer. I'm not a toy designer. So the only reason I could think that this was done was to save on plastic. It's the only reason I can think why you wouldn't make these channels completely solid up and down. But yeah, so that's what you need to do, is sand this guy. And then this nub on the other side, I started trying to sand it, and I found that was quite honestly a pain and took too long. And so that's when the X-Acto knife chisel blade came in. And if you just come in here and work at it, it comes off. You don't even have to heat this up. It comes off, if you have a relatively new blade on here, comes off nice and clean, pretty straight. So I had no issues removing this with an X-Acto knife, and that's the way I would really go on removing that nub, is to take it off with an X-Acto knife. And yeah, so you can see that, I started with a low grit sandpaper to do my test fits, but of course I finished it off with a polishing sandpaper going all the way up to 2000 grit sandpaper, and you can see you can if you really look hard, you can maybe see some bits in the corners where it looks like it might have been sanded, but it more or less looks like it did out of the box. It looks real clean, real nice, and that's how I want to leave my stuff if I'm gonna be touching it. The entire point of this is for it to function more smoothly. It's too tight, it's too rough. We want it to move smoothly up and down in this channel here in the torso. And so you want to polish the sides, because that's going to make it more smooth and cause less of a problem. I would also recommend, especially on this taller piece here, is to take your sandpaper and just ever so slightly round the corners. I did it on all corners, but I think primarily on this bigger piece, because that's what the taller side, because that's what sits in the front torso, which is the problem child here. I would recommend taking your sandpaper and rounding these edges ever so slightly, so that there is less of a chance that it can catch in between these little fins. And if it does, it hopefully just rolls right off. So yeah, that's what you need to do for Optimus Prime. Something optional that you don't have to do, but I recommend, is you again take your lubricant here, put a couple drops in a cup or a pallet of some sort, and then dip a small paintbrush in there into the lubricant, and then paint it on the fins. Because if you were to just drop even just a single drop of lubricant in here, that's a lot going where you don't really need it. What you really need it is, you know, just along the sides here, because that's where the primary problem friction is on this guy. So if you just take it and then just, you know, paint the lubricant onto the sides of the fins here, and then along the edge here at the top if you even want to. And so that's what I did. And so if you can, you can barely tell, but you don't need a lot. A little bit goes a long way, and it's gonna stay there for a good amount of time. So yeah, I would, again, not required, but something I would recommend to do. And I went ahead and I did that on the rear torso as well, just as a precaution. Again, I just painted the lubricant onto the fins and then up and down the sides. And yeah, I haven't had any issues with my Prime ever since. I knew about this problem before I even opened mine. And the process I showed you is exactly what I did out of the box. I wanted to move the torso as little as possible. And yeah, I took it apart. I sanded this really well. When I was doing my test fitting is when I discovered the problem with this nub here. So I went ahead and removed the nub that interacts with the rear torso plate. And so far so good. I haven't had any issues. So I'll get this back together, and I'll show you a couple of tips that I also recommend for Optimus Prime. All right, I want to show you real quick here what I do with the torso when I'm reassembling it. And so what I do with the screws here in particular, I of course fully tighten them all the way until they're hand tight. You know, I'm not using a drill or anything crazy with these, so I hand tighten them all the way. But then what I do is I take 1/8 of a turn out of these top ones, and then I take 1/4 of a turn out of these bottom ones. And so that loosens the torso ever so slightly. So you can see here, there's just a little bit of a gap, a little bit of extra wiggle room available in this torso. And so that's, you know, the main problem of this torso is things are too tight. There's not enough give. And of course, the vast majority of that, you know, 99% of that is solved with making the T-piece, you know, narrower, removing that nub so that this just slides smooth as butter, and really no resistance at all. You know, there's still a little bit of friction, of course, but not to the degree that it has out of the box. But you know, just that extra peace of mind that I want to have on my copy specifically, I just give it so that there's just a little bit of wiggle room here, to just in case, you know, things get moving away in that I don't intend them to while I'm transforming or anything like that. There's just that little extra room of give in case the part needs it, so that the force doesn't immediately go across the abdomen and crack something. So that's just a quick thing that I wanted to share that I do when reassembling my Optimus Prime. All right, and so we have Optimus Prime here, back fully assembled, and you can tell that after I've done my fixed here, that this torso gives me no real trouble anymore. There's still some friction, you know, which is fine. We don't want it flying off here, but you know, I can hold it by the torso, and the legs don't come flying down, which is something that a lot of people were worrying about for whatever reason. But there's no reason to worry about going too far with this. I mean, mine has a little bit of wobble, but I'm fine with that, because when you have it in base Optimus Prime mode, which honestly, how many people are really going to be doing that? But when you do have it in this mode, it's held down by gravity. So like, unless you go to pick it up by the torso, which I actually just did something I'm going to tell you to not do. But if you were to pick this up by the torso, like, and the feet were to come flying down, like, that's not a big deal to me in my opinion. But even still, mine's still totally fine. And it slides, you know, gotta be, I'm still a little careful with it. I don't go yanking on it. But yeah, I feel like that's pretty smooth in my opinion. No issues with that. Now, a couple of tips for handling your Optimus Prime and transforming it in the future. Again, like I mentioned, I showed something that I'm going to tell you to not do, which is do not put any pressure on this lower torso, on this abdomen region at all whatsoever for any reason. This is the area known to break, so why would you put pressure on it? Do not do that. I mean, I just lightly put my thumb there to pick it up. And you know, it sucks. It's something you need to be conscious of while handling this toy. But that's just the reality of the situation. Just don't touch the torso. You can grab it from the sides here like I was doing to slide it up just fine. But you know, this is the area known to break, mostly in that center there, but it does crack on these sides here. So you still want to be a little bit careful of the sides. But yeah, mainly when I slide it, I'm grabbing from up here. And then I'll show you with the spine here that even though I took out that piece here, like there's still a good amount of friction there in the lower part and then the upper part here. Like that's just all friction from the joint itself. So I mean I find that piece in there is only potential to cause problems in the future, so I just removed it. Now, a couple of tips in addition to just not touching there. When you're sliding the torso up and down, I would recommend you trying to make sure that your spine is more or less straight before you go and slam it down and move it up. So that way there's less potential to put any force front to back on this torso. And then the big one that people seem to have issues with is with engaging these clips in the backpack for super mode and combined mode. And so I found that the best way to do this, so in the instructions, it tells you to lift this up and just leave it here and then try to flip these around and clip it in. And so just with the clearances here and how tight the tolerances are on this part, that's kind of impossible to do. And so I've seen a lot of people trying to flip these around, and when they're pushing it in, they're also pushing their thumb on the torso to try to snap it in place. Big no-no. Do not do that. So the tip here for engaging these clamps in a safe way is to get it where you need it to, and then fold the torso completely forward and then bring the clips down. Now this is a little bit hairy to do here because like the backpack wants to lift itself off, but you can get it to where, there we go, it'll clip in, but you still you want to get it so that the backpack is not lifting off, which can be hard to do, again, given the tolerances of these clips. See, the main issue here is you have these teeth here that need to sit in, they need to sit just above this joint, and so getting that all lined up and happy is a bit of a pain to do. And then you have these gray clips here that clip into these slots here. And so getting that all lined up is a bit difficult, but it is definitely doable this way. And it will give you, there we go, I got it. It'll give you, you'll have a little bit of a gap there, but then when you bring it You bring it up, it'll get fully seated. I think that's the way to go when doing that, because it'll give you way less problem versus trying to do it when it's fully upright. If you want to, because this is where the screws are and it's meant to be touching here, you want to just a little bit there to make sure it's secure in the back here. But yeah, definitely don't put your thumb here when you're trying to push it forward, because I've seen too many people do that. Just checking mine here. Yeah, it still seems fine. I will say also that that just like the paint in here in general is just prone to a lot of just like chipping and stuff. So just like any little blemishes easily get shown on this silver paint here. So I wouldn't immediately freak out if you see something there. Like I've got a little bit of something right there. The camera is probably honestly not even picking it up, but it's definitely not a crack. It's just, you know, this is a really shiny paint, and just for whatever reason picks up blemishes pretty easily. So that's just something to make note of if you ever notice anything. But yeah, so that's everything you need to know, all the fixes you need for Optimus Prime here for this Omega Prime set. Let's go ahead and move on to Ultra Magnus. All right, and here we are with Ultra Magnus here in robot mode. I already have the legs taken off, so you'll want to do that. Something to note when performing this fix on Ultra Magnus with the wings in particular, you actually do have to transform this at least once in order to do what we need to do, or at the very least you need to push down the wings because of the way that they function and the area that you need to get to. You actually do need to push the wings in on the backpack in order to get to the area. I'll show that here when we disassemble it. You don't have to go fully into robot mode in order to get to it, but if you want to check out robot mode, it's not going to actually be that big of an issue, because like I said, you do have to, because in alt mode these wings are pushed up, and on that peg is the problem peg, and needs, because of how this sits on the plate, it actually needs to be pushed through in order for you to get to it. So you actually doing that with all of it assembled is actually better, because there's a lot more rigidity to that. So if you're in robot mode, you want to of course disengage all of the clips here in the backpack and flip the wings out here if I can get it to go. Yeah, so you flip the wings out here. And so our point of attention here is on these 4 screws that we need to get to take this backpack apart, where these wings sit. And so in order to get in there, so there are 4 screws down there, and you can see that's pretty deep. And the thing is that I mentioned earlier is that the neck on my screwdriver bit here, it can get in there, and I can kind of feel it sitting in the screw, but I really don't want to strip the screw on that. So a way to cheat that is if your screwdriver set has, because I mentioned, these are 4mm screwdriver bits, I could have a 4mm socket attachment. Let's see if I can get that for you. 4mm socket attachment there. So this will slot in there. It's a little loose, but all these bits are magnetic, so it helps. And so that gives me just a little bit of extra length that I can get in here. And I do have to hold this so that I have less of an issue here, but yeah, we're getting there. All right, and so to take this apart, you just got to, it's also friction fit in there a little bit. And that's mainly from the posts that we're going to be dealing with actually sit into a well on the backpack. So you just want to lift it out a little bit at a time on either side to get that out, and then we'll have it come off of this hinge here. Oh, there's my last screw. Okay, now we got this off. So yeah, here's the backpack here. This is where the posts go into, and there's actually a good amount of friction with them sitting in the posts, as they naturally are. But our main issue here is how they pop in and out of this plate. So this plate is actually pretty thin. There's a lot of play here. So you're gonna wanna be careful when handling this. But yeah, so the way this functions here is there's this lip that runs around the posts. And then you of course got the hole here, and there's these notches cut out of this plate. So there is a little bit of give here when trying to slide these in and out, but they're really, it's not enough. The tolerances on this thing is absolutely crazy, and it's way too tight. And so what's happening is when you're in robot mode and going back to alt mode and you're trying to pull this out, it catches on that lip there. And because this lip is too big, I've seen it where someone pulling this, this pin, oh, let me show you here. There's a pin that holds this in, but it doesn't go all the way through. So this is actually a pin that is screwed into this white post here. And I saw a picture on TFW forums where someone pulled this, and because the tolerances were so tight and it didn't budge from that lip, it didn't clear through this plate, and it instead pulled the pin out of this post and completely sheared the plastic because it's a screw. So there's no way to get that back in. You'd have to like drill it out and put epoxy in probably. You do not want that happening. And so the way to fix that here, it's gonna take some time. It's a bit of a pain, but what you're gonna do, I found, was my sandpaper sticks here where I have it wrapped around and it's on the edge. Just get in here and sand these lips down on either side. And there's one on either side of each post. And so you're gonna wanna get in there and sand those down. You know, start with your low grit first and then work your way up as you go, as need be. And so yeah, now mine is just, oh, look at that. So smooth. So smooth. Now I have added a little bit of a lubricant on here as well to make it a little bit nicer to go. So if you see anything shiny on there, that's what that is. It does not come with lubricant out of the box. The Optimus Prime torso does come with a little bit of lubricant on it, so they knew that that was going to be a point of friction, but for whatever reason they didn't add it on here, so I went ahead and did that myself. Some tips here. So I found that so you have these posts here for the screws. So in default, it's pretty easy to have the wings sitting on the piece, this plate like this. And so it's not too bad to try to get your sandpaper in here on this side, but because of the clearance with this post, it's pretty much impossible to get your sandpaper in on this one. So that means trying to rotate it around in awkward ways. And now this will also, depending on how awkward this is, will depend on which hand is dominant for you. I mean, if you're ambidextrous, then, you know, more power to you. But I'm right-handed, so I was primarily holding this with my left hand, and so one side was easier to get than the other, just because like the way you have to awkwardly hold this and rotate this in order to get a good angle on these lips. So again, so my tips are: try to angle the lips so that they are facing the side where the screw post is farthest away. And again, you know, the sides that are more or less default for that, they're pretty easy to get to. But then another way to try to finagle things around, I found, is that if the side you want to work on, if you unfold the wing, leave that flat, and then the other side you raise up until the point it hits toward the lip. You don't have to pull it all the way through, but just leave it there, and then that'll give you some extra room that you can rotate the one you're working on left and right in order to get a better angle. I mean, it's best if you can get the lip to the outside where you don't even have to contend with these posts, with the screw posts at all. If you can rotate it around where you get to the outside, that is best. But the secondary goal is to get it where it's here, and then that'll enable you to get your sandpaper stick in here. I did try to use an X-Acto knife at first on these, and for me personally, I found that didn't work really well. You can try it if you want, but I wasn't able to really get a good angle. I didn't try to use the chisel blade, like for me, wasn't really gonna fit at all in there. So I tried to get a standard, you know, X-Acto blade in there, and it just really wasn't working for me. So that's why I recommend using the sandpaper on this one here. But yeah, so that's what you need to do. You need to sand down the lips on this guy, and then you just test as you go. And again, this is a combination of me sanding it down quite a bit and also putting some lubricant on there, and it holds its position plenty good now, but it's also has enough give that I'm not really struggling with it. And anyone that's tried to transform this out of the box, even that initial push just takes an insane amount of force. And so I just cannot recommend enough to do this, because the alternative is one day you go to transform it and it breaks and you're screwed. So just do this out of the box, have the peace of mind that it's never going to break on you for as long as you have the toy. So yeah, I definitely recommend doing this, and then it's really easy to put it back together. You just have to make sure you get this guy seated back on the hinge here. This hinge sits in some slots. Just make sure that's seated in there when you put it back together. Actually, it goes this way. And then what I did to put some lubrication on here. Actually, the surface of these posts is big enough where I just put a single drop right on that edge there, and then I took my paintbrush and I went around the main part of the post here, and then I went around the lips as well. And then when I put it back together, back in here, you can see that there's a little bit in there, probably. See, and I just moved it up and down quite a few times, and so that spread it around, so that it's good to go now, and I don't have any major friction issues. So yeah, that's how you fix Ultra Magnus's backpack and the friction issues. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this back together, and we'll move on to the next Ultra Magnus issue. And actually, before we get to the next part, I want to mention something I forgot real quick. The entire point of this video, like I mentioned, is to try to do things the right way, try to do things in a relatively clean way. And so we're not wanting to force things when they shouldn't be. And along those same lines, we want to try to come up with solutions that are clean, and get, you know, real fundamental about it. You know, we as human beings invented tools for a reason. Let's use the tools we have available to us to solve problems like this. And so I've seen some suggestions online of telling people to just repeatedly move this in and out, and because these two plastics, the frame that this sits in and then the white posts are of a different hardness, and so the repeated moving in and out of the wing will eventually smush the slightly softer plastic of the white posts, so that will enable it to move smoother. No, don't do that. That is a terrible idea. Please do not do that. The entire reason we're doing this fix is because when you pull the wing out, there is a possibility it will break. So if your solution for the problem is to potentially end up with the problem, your solution is not a solution, okay? So please don't listen to people like that on the internet. I'm not an expert, like I said, but like, come on, use common sense here, people. Don't do the thing that's gonna break the thing in order to fix the thing. You know what I mean? So just, you know, it's 4 screws. You just open it up, hit it with some sandpaper, and you're good to go. Okay, so don't listen to people that tell you to just move this in and out, and then that'll barbarically squish the plastic, hopefully enough where it's not a problem for you. No, don't do that. Just use some tools. It's quite simple and very easy. It's a little bit of a pain and it'll take some time, but relatively speaking, I mean, you're just using a screwdriver and some sandpaper. It's really not that hard. So please just do it you know, the common sense way here. Don't do anything crazy with your expensive toy. Don't try to break it to solve a problem. You know what I mean? So please keep that in mind. All right, so next for Ultra Magnus, the issue can be found on the legs here. So there is this, so the feet are connected to this piece here, and this piece rests on this main body plate for the lower leg, and mine's already removed, but on this piece here, this right here was originally a flat plane, and there were 2 really prominent edges to that flat plane. And what would happen is, or what can happen is, when you go to flip this around, it was the plane and the edges are present on both this side and on this side. So no matter what mode you're in, if you go to transform it, when you swing this around, those edges of those planes would dig into this plastic on the other side that it's attached to, and you would get a major stress mark on the other side. So you can actually see on my other leg here, I do have a little bit of a stress mark right there. A little bit of a stress mark. I did the fix and I was able to heat it up a little bit with a hair dryer. That dulled it down a little bit, but not a lot. So yeah, that stress mark is still there. Fortunately, this is an area where you're never really going to see this, because if you're in Ultra Magnus, if you're in alt mode, if you're in robot mode, it's going to be covered by this plate, and it does open up, and it sits in this orientation here for combined mode. But when Prime's foot is here, and then the back of Prime's leg is covering this, so you're never ever going to see this area. But it's definitely a point of concern, because I did see an image, the person that initially discovered the stress mark on TFW, it was a significantly larger stress mark, to the point where I think, like, given the tolerances on your copy, it's potential that those edges could poke a hole through this, and like, nobody wants that. you know? So like, yeah, you might not ever see it, but you don't want a hole that's not supposed to be there on your expensive brand new toy. So yeah, it's something that I think needs to be fixed out of the box. Thankfully, I think it can be mitigated out of the box where you don't get any stress marks at all, because on my second copy, my second leg here, I don't have a stress mark this is the second leg I did it on. On this leg, someone posted about the stress mark, and I looked at my leg to figure out, and so I was the first person to figure out with how that was functioning back here and how that stress mark was actually forming. So unfortunately, me being the first one to figure it out means I also ended up getting a stress mark in the process of figuring it out. But yeah, so it comes like this, and if you just come in here, again, the plane isn't there anymore because I got rid of mine. But the reason one of the big reasons I recommend this number 17 chisel blade, got to get this foot out of the way to help. This number 17 chisel blade is almost the exact width between these side indentations. Let's see if I can get it to focus here. These side portions here, the width of this blade is pretty much exactly that. So you can get in here on this part where the plane is and the edges are, and you can just carve away at it. Now keep in mind, you don't need to take off a lot of plastic. So don't go in here at an extreme angle and dig out a whole chunk. No, just come in at a really shallow angle and just slowly come across this and take material off. And then you could do that up here as well. If you want, what I found was also helpful is if you rotate the leg panel here around, rotate this flap around. That also will enable you to get in from the side here as well. So that's another angle that you can get work material off of. It's really helpful for when you need to get this top edge. I found this top edge was particularly a pain to do. And yeah, I definitely recommend using the X-Acto knife on this portion that needs to be fixed, because on the first leg when I tried it, I was doing it solely with sandpaper. And again, I came in here with finishing sandpaper and all that jazz after the fact, but it just took so long to do with just sandpaper. And I was trying to be really careful to not get much other areas that I didn't want to be sanding anyway. And under a bright light here that I'm using to show you on camera here, you can still barely see the scuff marks. So under normal room lighting conditions, this is barely noticeable. And this area isn't really seen too much anyway, so I'm not too bothered by the fact that this is a little scuffed up from me trying to get that down with sandpaper. But then just compare that to where I did most of my work with the X-Acto knife, and then I came in with finishing sandpaper to smooth it off. It obviously looks much better there. So yeah, again, to recap, there are on this part of the leg, there's like a flat plane with two sharp edges on either side, and that plastic digs in right here. So when you go to, let me disengage this leg here, and it digs into this plane here. So when it comes around, it's pushing into that plate on either side. And digs into this plastic here, causing a major stress mark. And from what I saw of someone else's copy, like that stress mark was extreme, and to the point where it seemed like the plastic was ready, like this edge was ready to poke through the plastic. It was so thin and stressed. So yeah, come in here with your chisel blade X-Acto knife, carve it away, and then once you carve that away there, when you flip it over, you want to, you just want to make sure so that it's flush more or less with the two these two lips on either side. Just, you're gonna have to, look at it and carve it down so that it's flush with either of these two sides before you even go to attempt to flip this over. Carve it down so that's flush. You don't need to take away the whole, edge. You don't need to take away this whole bit here. That's unnecessary. I wouldn't do that. You just need to make it so that this part is even with these two parts, because this middle section is the problem. That being said, just to be sure, when you go to rotate it around to do the other side, just to make sure that just in case you didn't take off enough here, but also the edge that's still on the other side. When you go to rotate this around, take this part, hold this in your offhand firmly, the lower leg in your offhand firmly, and then when you rotate this piece around, gently but firmly pull on this piece, pull it away as you rotate it, and that will keep this edge that you have yet to cut away from this piece. And that's how I was able to avoid getting a stress mark on this one before I had even shaved this opposite side down. That is hidden away when this leg is down normally. I came in here, did this, and then I pulled this away when I rotated it, and that avoided any stress marks here, and I was able to shave this down, and now it's totally fine. I think this is just here to make this movement feel like chunky, feel better when transforming, because in modes for Ultra Magnus, there are clips right here on the leg, and they clip in right here. So those lips those edges on that plane are serving no purpose for when the leg is in this orientation. And when you transform it to go to Omega Prime, so this is folded up like this, and then when this how does this go? Oh, this comes up like this, sorry. How does this go again? Yes. So it stays like this. So you see these two holes here go into these two posts up here. And that is the primary way when you bring this around for Omega Prime's foot, those posts just slot into that there, and that's how that's held in place. So again, the edges on these planes are not a primary function of this piece here. So you're not really going to have any problems shaving those away, because that's pretty securely in there. And not to mention, this whole foot is tabbed together like crazy. I'm not worried about this coming apart and with those not being there. Those tab in really well, so I'm not worried about this foot flopping around at all anyway. So yeah, if you don't want stress marks on your Magnus legs like this, or even worse, I feel like this is, best case scenario for how this is gonna look. Yeah, so to avoid that from happening, definitely need to, again, take in your chisel blade, carve it down, take your finishing sandpaper, so your 800 all the way up to 2000. And that's also another thing that helps when you have the sandpaper, when you have it wrapped around the popsicle stick on the edge like this, you can get the edge exactly where you need it to and nowhere else. So you do your popsicle stick sandpaper, and so see how the edge on that is worn away like crazy on both ends here. That's because, getting in here like this, I used a lot of the sandpaper on here from this alone. this is how I used up. So yeah, definitely recommend you do this as well. And so yeah, so that's Magnus's leg, and so we've got one more thing to talk about with Ultra Magnus. All right, I brought Ultra Magnus's torso back in here to talk about this final issue. Now, unfortunately, there is no really easy solvable way to combat this problem. It's something that happens at the factory, unfortunately. From my understanding is there are some methods that you can treat the plastic to help it, and of course you could ultimately paint it if you really want to. But there is, from what I've seen on every single copy of photos online, is that the plastic on Magnus, the white plastic, specifically in the arms and on the hood, the cab of the truck here, is that they are discolored. They are not matched. And so again, I need to emphasize here that this is probably not coming across on camera. It is very subtle, and you will very likely not notice it under normal indoor lighting conditions. And so by that I mean like LED lights. The way you can see this is with UV light. So you need to go by a window on a sunny day, or just straight up go outside in sunlight. You know, sunlight is UV light, and you will see that some panels on your Ultra Magnus arms are very, very crisp, bright white. And there are other panels, you know, especially these front ones where the hands are located. They're an ever so slightly different shade of white. I wouldn't necessarily say they're yellow. There has been one extreme example I've seen where they were straight up yellow out of the box. But for most people, it's more of like an off-white. It's a different shade of white. It's hard to tell, and again, you can't really see under LED light. You have to see it under UV light. But yes, from every single copy I've seen, they're all like that. Even people who don't think their Magnus is yellowed out of the box, that's because you're not looking at it in sunlight. You have to look at under UV light. And that's on both the arms for Ultra Magnus, and it's also the case on the cab for Ultra Magnus, where this piece is a different color from the whites on either side as well. And so the reason for this is because all of the white pieces are supposed to be treated with a fluorescent whitening agent. And so what this does, it reflects UV light, and it prevents the natural whitening, the natural yellowing of white plastic. But all of the parts were not treated with this fluorescent whitening agent. And so that's where the discoloration is happening. So like I said, there's not really anything you can do. I know that there are some chemical products out there that you can treat plastic with to try to remove the natural yellowing of the plastic. And on parts like at least the arms anyway, you could probably get away with painting them if you really wanted to, but then you're just back to a situation where you're either trying to match the white, and matching white paint is a pain, or you're just ending up painting the entire thing, which, you know, we shouldn't have to be doing, quite honestly. But that's, you know, just the reality of the situation here. So yeah, like I said, there's not really anything realistic that you can do about this. It's more something to keep an eye on over time. And this is more of just like a PSA that this is a thing. And we'll see if Hasbro, the only way to fix this, you know, legitimately, is for Hasbro to completely rerun every single Ultra Magnus, make 28,000 new units that, you know, have the correct treatment on the white parts, and everyone gets a new Ultra Magnus. That's the only way to fix this properly. Because there's no way, you know, you can send out new arms for sure, but you can't like send out a new torso. You'd have to redo the entire figure realistically. Again, we're waiting to see if Hasbro does that and what they do to attempt to fix this. But yeah, hopefully this is just a situation where it's just a natural whitening over time, like with any other white plastic figure we've had over the decades, you know, like the original Ultra Magnus figure. But yeah, this is just, you know, a PSA. If you want to check that your Magnus is yellowing, you have to do it in ultraviolet lights. I'm sure at some point here I've thrown up a picture of my own where I've, you know, stood next to a window on a bright day, and you can very clearly see how the whites are definitely a different color. And I highly recommend that if your Magnus is in that state, that you send Hasbro an email, you know, customer complaint, whatnot, to let them know, so that even if you're okay with this, that you're at the very least letting Hasbro know that that is a problem with your copy from the production date on yours, and that they hopefully send out a solution to those of us that want it. But yeah, so that's Ultra Magnus. All right, and there you have it. Everything you need to know about fixing your Haslab Omega Prime out of the box. Should we have to do this? Of course not. But I must say it really is an amazing set once you've completed the fixes and it's good to go. Like I said, I'm filming this the last week of May 2025. While not everyone has gotten their copy yet, a good number of people have. The problems I've talked about today have been well documented on the TFW forums, and I think at this point all of the major issues have been found. We're still waiting to hear from Hasbro on how they'll be addressing the issues. In the meantime, I'll be enjoying mine. Issues aside, it really is an amazing figure and looks absolutely stunning on the shelf. If you found this video helpful, be sure to let me know by giving it a thumbs up. And if you made it this far, I must say thank you. This is the first video on this channel, actually. While I'm not new to YouTube, this toy channel is new for me. I plan to make more general toy reviews and news videos in the future, so if you're interested in that sort of stuff, feel free to subscribe. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.